later. Okay, there we go. So we're working on our on arrival question, and this chapter was about empathy as an attitude, and then also about the skills of empathy. So the question was just to hear from everyone to list specific skills that you personally see are part of an empathic way of being. And by empathic way of being, I was meaning the mindset and heart set or attitude, as well as consciousness. And Bill Miller talked about mindset. No, he talked about heart set and attitude. That is sort of more the spirit of empathy. And then personally, which of these skills do you want to personally work on the most? We have different skills, and everyone has those that they're wanting to feel that they need to work on. So we want to go around now and just hear everyone's skills that they see and which one they want to work on. And we'll just go down the list, and I'm first. So I kind of divide empathy, the skills according to the different areas of empathy. So there's self-empathy, which is just identifying, being able to feel into and identify our inner feelings, put them to words and express them. So I see that as one skill. There's the empathic listening, which is, listening to others. So I've done a lot of that, which is, reflecting what someone is expressing, reflecting kind of the feelings that someone is expressing, and maybe the feelings behind the feelings, the needs or values behind those. So each of those is a different skill that I'm seeing, as well as the empathic speaking. There's the empathic listening, and there's another area, the empathic speaking. And with the empathic speaking, it's noticing one's own feeling and being able to express that, sort of similar to, I guess I would add, be building on self-empathy. And it's identifying and sharing the feelings that arise as a response, as a consequence of someone else's action. So if someone else has an action, to be able to notice that how that action affects oneself and be able to articulate that. So I see that as another skill. There's empathic relationship, identifying, articulating the feelings of the relationship. So what is the feeling? Can we identify the feelings in the group? And the one I'm really trying to work on is to speak from my felt experience, because I kind of have a lot of analysis, judgment, and I like to be able to speak more from my own personal felt experience. So those are some that I, for me. So I guess next would be Andrea. Oh, that was 3 minutes. Thank you. That was pretty good timing.
Okay, so I guess I wrote like a story, but basically when I was thinking about an empathic way of being, I kind of thought about how people talk about being empathic, but how do we really think about like what that means? It kind of goes back to the first chapter or our first discussion. So I kind of took us back to ancient Greece, and I said, Socrates believed he was the wisest man because he didn't know anything. So I related it to empathy as a mind state, in that you kind of have to let go of any preconceived notions of emotions and notions of emotions. Sorry, I just noticed that. But when someone's starting to tell you a story, it's really easy to think, oh, I experienced that. I know exactly how they feel. And then I feel like you go back into your own experience and those feelings start coming back up. And instead of actually listening to that person, you're actually reliving your own experience. And so I feel like we need to get into this mind state of, I don't know how their emotions were. So for me, emotions and understanding them, how different each individual feels, For instance, I said, sadness for someone might feel like a gut-wrenching, like tingle of emotions weighing in your abdomen. But on the other hand, somebody else might feel sadness more in their throat, like they can't swallow or they can't talk, and they just have tears and they're just like all consumed in there. So I feel like assuming that the feeling is mutual does a disservice to our empathy. So we need to get into the mind state of we don't know. And what I really want to do is be able to get into that mind state without having to think too much about it. Was that time? I think you said?
Yeah, you still have a minute or so, but
yeah. And so I said, I've been reading books about different archetypes, and one of them is the intellectual, and it's someone who genuinely wants to hear about other people's experiences, not someone who just wants someone to tell them a story, and because you sat through their story, now they have to sit through your story. I feel like we also do that a lot. Okay, well, I endured your nonsense, now listen to me. My turn, and she says this book I'm reading, the archetype of the intellectual, is someone who genuinely just wants to learn about experience through someone else's eyes. And I really want to try to do that more, without my own feelings and my own past experiences kind of clouding me actually listening instead of just waiting.
Okay, thank you. Denise?
Okay.
I'm just going around the circle here. Sorry. I was going to go down the list. I messed up here. It was Dee Dee was next.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
All right. I got the timer going.
Okay.
Okay. So to read what I was writing, there's a quote that I used here coming from Douglas Steele, who's an author, that I found a few years ago that I sometimes use in MI trainings. And it says, to listen another soul into a condition of disclosure and discovery may be almost the greatest service that any human being ever performs for another. And it struck me when I found that quote that that's what I was trying to do, and the environment that I was trying to create for others to also be able to do. And how, in my own personal life, how important that is, whether it's in my friendships. I've discovered my deep friendships are really with people who are able to listen my soul. And I think we all have different kinds of friends. You have the one that you might call to go to a movie with, and that's a very different person from the one you might call when you have a need to cry or to share a joy or something more emotional. And that's okay. As I get older, it becomes even more okay. And I try to let people just give what they're capable of giving and be okay with that, because that's their gift. So I also discovered another definition of compassion that struck me. That compassion is an attempt to understand the point of view of the other and how that's different from empathy. With the current definition of empathy, I think is that I'm trying to hear another person, but it's a little bit different from trying to really understand their point of view. And in the reading, Bill talked about walking in somebody else's shoes. And that's a paraphrase of an old Chippewa saying that I grew up with that says, you can't, I'm going to paraphrase it too, you can't appreciate it or can't understand another man until you've walked in his moccasins. And how growing up with that idea led me to realize that that's the greatest gift, is to really fully immerse in someone else's world. so that I can say, maybe I don't like what you did, or maybe I don't agree with what you did, or but at the end of sharing your experience with me, I can appreciate why you did it. And maybe, just maybe, I would do the same thing if I were in that circumstance.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Denise.
Deborah?
Okay. I'm gonna have to drop you guys out so I can see what I wrote. So I am still very much moved by how mindfulness has helped me quiet my mind and notice what I'm experiencing. And I am improving on noticing what others are experiencing. There's a part I left out here, but I'm going to speak to, which goes back to a couple years ago I began, because in my training, we kind of look at our stories, and I don't train people to short circuit them, but I train them to notice them, and without blame or shame. But I took an additional view with that by saying, when I looked at people, I might have a judgment going on about them, boy, they dress like that, or, I could even be sitting eating a piece of cake and look at someone else doing the same thing and judge them for it. So I am looking at other people's stories as a conduit to connect to them, meaning instead of judging their story and wanting to get to the end of it, because I'm kind of like that, I'm impatient, I'm beginning to savor their story and derive from that their place of need, their feelings and needs. So I experimented with that, and I found it helped me a lot. It helped me ground myself, connect to them, and not be in such a hurry to get to the end of the story, or not be in such a hurry about that process. So that was just new for me, and I found it helpful. And then with that, it helps me become more of what I call when I was thinking of the word activism, I'm still thinking of that word, and it still stimulates me in a bit of a chaotic, anxious, impatient, kind of angry way. I just go, whoa, stop. And so, but another twist on that to me is being a steward. Like we talk about being a steward of the environment, but are people being a steward of their own process, their own experiences, their own emotions, and in what way are they? And for me, the mindfulness speaks to that, because I'm very good. I've been a very quiet person a lot of my life, but when I start speaking, I can put it together, and so I can appreciate that quietness and provide that space for others. I didn't answer all the questions because I just answered what felt relevant at the time. But I'm like others. I need to improve my verbal feedback, listening empathically, and not filtering their experience through.
Okay. Those 3 minutes. Okay, thank you. So next was I'm just going down the list, was Dea.
Can someone else go? I just need a little time.
Okay, sure. Then next was, after that was Denise.
Okay. The thing that stood out to me in that sort of thinking about the stewarding that you were talking about, Deb, too, is the notion of service. That for me, the empathy in a way is about putting yourself aside in service of others. So it in service of understanding their story or helping them come to do that discovery process for themselves, that it's not about you, that it is about putting yourself in service of them. And I even think about this in terms of my own self-empathy, that it is what I have come to understand for me is that I need to put aside my sort of what I think of as my false self, or my manufactured self, definitely not my higher self. I need to put that aside in service of listening to my own heart, and listening to that, and allowing the higher self, or the true self, to be able to come to manifest, or to come to participate in it. And it's the same in a lot of ways. That's for me what meditation does, and it helps create that sense of being able to put myself, and which all that stuff, the judgments and everything that you talked about, of being able to put that aside in service of something higher. And I do really believe that we won't, unless we have some kind of higher purpose in doing this, it doesn't work very well. I mean, you have to have a really good reason to put yourself aside in service of others, because it's a vulnerable spot to be in. It doesn't always feel really comfortable. It's work. It's a lot of work, constant work, to being able to put yourself aside and recognize that it's just not about you. And so it's like there has to be a sense of serving a higher purpose, of which, maybe the empathy, creating a culture of empathy, is a high enough purpose that we become willing to do it. But that willingness to do that is really an important part of that. So for me. Okay. I reached.
All right. Thank you. Jess?
I'm feeling so inspired by all of you. For me, the list of skills that I'd like to call on when I want to be an empathic being is resilience, curiosity, courage, trust, shared humanity, vulnerability, having clear boundaries, and kindness, and the practical skill, really the reflective listening. When I'm getting confused about my empathy practice, I always like to go back to the etymology of the word. And I believe the etymology is about something about feeling with, or being in feelings. And that always helped me to go back to this idea that it's a matter of opening your presence, opening your heart, opening your trust, your vulnerability, to be with someone in whatever is happening, either it's happy or sad or whatever. And for me, calling upon my courage and trusting that I can do that, and trusting the person, calling on my resilience, my curiosity, and my kindness helps me to be in that state of consciousness, empathy consciousness. What I would like to get better at is my own empathy, my self-empathy, because if I'm getting too harsh on myself too fast and judging, if my brain is wired to judge myself very fast, I'm going to judge other people very fast. And yes, I do. So it's something I'd like to move away from, like jumping right away in the default of negative judgment. And I would like right away my default to be, oh, what's happening with that person? Especially people who are either very close to me. Like I cannot do that with my mom, for example. I don't know why. It's the hardest thing to do with the closest to you. Right away, I need to judge. Whereas a stranger, I'd be more inclined to be like, what's happening with this poor guy? So I'd like to change my default mode, especially when I'm being the most triggered. And the last thing I think I want to improve, just to be really fully present. I tend to be in my mind and be looking for, my ego takes the whole space and be like, oh, you're going to find the best response to answer this person and you're going to help them and they're going to change your life. And I just want to get rid of that and just be present.
Okay, thank you. Alex?
Okay. Yeah, my initial response to this was it was really a good question, but I something about the word skills was weird to me, because I feel like, or at least this is what I was thinking before I listened to everyone else speak, but I feel like empathizing is not that complicated of a thing. It's not something that necessarily requires a lot of skill. If you have someone who's willing to just sort of share with you, then I feel like the hardest part of it is just being willing to kind of take on their position and take on their emotion, because it might be some really hard stuff. It might be something that was really sad for them or painful, or if it's a situation where you were involved and they're mad at you or something, it's really hard to kind of take on that emotion. So I didn't see it as a skill as much as sort of, I guess, what sort of Jess was saying about having the courage to be willing to endure those painful emotions. But yeah, but after listening to everyone else speak, I think what I would like to improve or get better at is just, I guess, just the overall speed of empathizing. Because I just feel like in a lot of situations, probably more self-empathy, but also with others. But I just feel like in a lot of situations, there's so much coming up within a matter of seconds or minutes, and there's just everything's moving way too fast, and it's just I feel like I'm trying to I don't know, move a mountain of dirt with a teaspoon or something. It's I need to just get through this so much faster. So I would just like to kind of build out my intuition, I guess, of being able to pick up on some random little thought and actually dive into the deeper, reasons behind it much more quickly, get clarity faster.
Okay. Sounds like that was it, or?
Yeah.
Okay. Looks like you had more time, but okay. Thank you. Daya, you ready?
Yeah, kind of. I wouldn't say I'm fully ready, but yeah, I could go. Yeah, for me, what struck is one is I really see that clear, mindful intention needs to be there if I want to be present with someone, to just hear without any judgments. Yeah, that's to be fully present with the person and just be able to completely let go of myself, that what I'm thinking of a situation or the person themselves, so that's really important, I feel. And I think other things, I resonate with everything that everyone else has said, and I'm not able to frame it differently now. What I'd like to work on is at times when I'm in conflict with someone, and I'm not able to sit with self-empathy, I have a tendency to talk to people who I know will agree with me. And so I really want to, I really have the intention to connect, and I do have the capacity to empathize with people with contrasting ideas than mine. But when I'm in conflict, I'd really like to find that space to either be mindful and sit with myself with self-empathy, or at least reach out to people who I know are not just going to agree with me, so I can, so that they would in a way push or help me to be able to connect with this person that I'm not agreeing with at this point, or we don't have the same ideas, and rather be able to connect to their needs and emotions at that time. Yeah, I'm done. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. Then let me just